had never felt so small in my entire life. It wasn't just the empty room, the untouched plates, or the unlit candles. It was the silence that spoke louder than any words. When I turned 65, I threw a party for the family, a small gesture of hope that they'd gather, share laughter, and celebrate me. But as the hours passed, I realized that no one was coming. I checked my phone, no messages, no calls, nothing. I waited until the roast in the oven had cooled, the chocolate cake I had spent hours baking now stale. No one came. It wasn't until the following day that I saw the photos. My daughter-in-law Chloe had posted them. A picture-perfect family vacation, a cruise across the Mediterranean, the sun setting over the horizon, everyone smiling except for me. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, the weight of their absence pressing down on my chest. This wasn't just a forgotten birthday, this was deliberate. They had planned this without me. I was nothing but an afterthought, an inconvenience. I had been there for them through everything, supporting them when they needed it, sacrificing my own comfort for theirs. And this was how they repaid me. I had always been the one to hold the family together, to keep the traditions alive. Now it felt like I had no place in their world anymore. I could feel the sting of betrayal, but I didn't cry. I couldn't afford to be weak. I wouldn't let them see me break. I had raised my son Jackson to be a man of integrity, to value family above all else. But now, as I looked at those photos, I saw a side of him I didn't recognize. Chloe had slowly pulled him away from me, turning him into someone who could ignore the woman who had given him life. I set my phone down and took a deep breath. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and let them push me aside. They thought they had won, that I would just accept their rejection. But they were wrong. I wasn't going to let them erase me. Not without a fight. It was time to take control back. It was time to remind them who I really was. The next few days passed in a blur of silence. My mind kept returning to that image of Chloe and Jackson on the cruise, their smiles so perfect, so fake. How could they pretend everything was fine when they had just left me behind like I didn't matter? It wasn't just the party or the absence. It was the fact that they had planned this. They had deliberately chosen to exclude me, to erase me from their lives. The house felt emptier than ever before. The walls seemed to close in as I walked from room to room. I couldn't stop thinking about all the sacrifices I had made for them. When Jackson was young, I had been his rock. I had stayed up late worrying over him when he was sick, held his hand when he was scared, supported him through every difficult moment of his life. And now it felt like he didn't even care. Chloe had managed to twist everything, turning him into someone who couldn't see the woman who had once been his everything. I could hear their voices in my head, the way they spoke to me now. Dismissive, cold, indifferent. I had given up so much for them, and yet all they had given me in return was rejection. It was in the little things. Like when Chloe insisted I move out of the guest room to make space for her new decorating ideas. Or when Jackson didn't even look me in the eye when we spoke, as if I were a stranger to him. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I had to do something. I spent that evening in my study, sorting through old letters and documents. I needed to find something, some way to reclaim my place, to make them understand that I wasn't just some invisible figure in their lives. My fingers brushed over an old family photo album, and I stopped. There we were, all smiles before things had changed. I looked at Jackson's face in the photo and wondered where he had gone. He looked so happy, so full of life. But that boy was gone now. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. But something inside me was awakening. The woman in that photo wasn't someone to be pushed aside. I had fought for my family for years, and I wasn't going to let it all slip away without a fight. I wasn't going to let Chloe and Jackson think they could just erase me. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. It was the quiet moments that weighed the heaviest. The silence of the house echoed through every room, growing louder each day. Chloe and Jackson went about their lives, oblivious to the damage they had caused, while I sat in the shadows, watching as they built their world without me. The more I observed, the more I realized how deep the divide had become. Jackson, once my proudest achievement, had grown distant, and Chloe's coldness only added to the growing chasm. It hurt, but I wasn't going to let it break me. I couldn't. I knew something had to change. The next morning I called a lawyer. I needed someone who could help me navigate the mess they had created. When I walked into the lawyer's office, I felt a strange sense of purpose. It wasn't anger that propelled me forward. It was something deeper, something more determined. The lawyer, a calm man named Mr. Hawthorne, listened intently as I explained everything: the party, the silence, the constant feeling of being pushed aside. He didn't say much at first, just nodded, and asked for details about my assets. That was when it hit me. I had been so focused on the emotional pain that I had forgotten to consider my own position, my own rights. I realized then that I had the power to fight back, to take control of what was rightfully mine. The house, the savings, everything that Jackson and Chloe had been quietly siphoning away, it was all under my name. Mr. Hawthorne pulled out a set of documents and began explaining how we could protect my interests. As he spoke, I felt a shift inside me. The woman who had been left in the shadows, the one who had been forgotten, was starting to come back to life. I had been passive for far too long, letting others dictate my worth. But that was over now. I wasn't going to sit quietly and watch as my family tore itself apart. I was going to take a stand. The next few days were filled with paperwork and phone calls, but I was resolute. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my place in this family. Chloe and Jackson had taken me for granted, assuming I would just fade into the background. But they were wrong. I wasn't invisible. I was their mother and their family, and I had every right to be seen. The days that followed were filled with a mixture of quiet determination and uneasy anticipation. I had made the decision to confront what had been eating away at me for so long. As the days went on, I felt the weight of the situation slowly lift, replaced by a calm clarity I hadn't known in years. Chloe's and Jackson's behavior had been a slap in the face, but I had a plan now. I wasn't just sitting back, waiting for them to take what was mine. I was going to take it back. The phone call came one afternoon. Chloe had been calling me more frequently, asking about the arrangements for the house. I wasn't sure what she was expecting, but her tone made it clear she didn't think I would fight for what was rightfully mine. I let the phone ring a few times before I picked it up. "Mom, I've been thinking about the house," Chloe began, as if we were simply discussing a piece of property, not the home I had built with my late husband, the place where I had raised my children. "We really think it's too much for you. You should really consider downsizing. I've already looked into some lovely places for you." I could hear the faint undertone of her words, a false sweetness that tried to disguise the coldness beneath. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. "Chloe, I've made arrangements," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere." There was a pause on the other end. "What do you mean?" she asked, clearly caught off guard. "I've taken steps. I'm not moving out and I'm not selling the house." Her voice became sharp. "Mom, you're just not in the position to make those kinds of decisions. You're not as young as you used to be. You can't take care of this place on your own." I felt a surge of anger, but I controlled it. I wasn't going to argue with her. "I'm doing fine," I replied. "Thank you for your concern, but I've made my decision." I hung up the phone, my hands shaking slightly. It was time for me to take the next step. The following morning, I sat down with Mr. Hawthorne again. Had all the documents ready, everything in place. I was no longer the woman who let herself be dismissed, overlooked, and ignored. I had a right to everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed. It was time for them to understand that. The lawyer looked over the papers with a quiet nod. "You've made the right decision," he said. I was determined now. No one was going to take what belonged to me, not Chloe, not Jackson. Not anymore. The days that followed were filled with an unsettling calm. Chloe and Jackson had not contacted me directly since our conversation, but I could feel the tension in the air. The house, which had once been full of laughter and warmth, now felt like a battleground. I spent my days quietly preparing, making sure everything was in order. The documents were ready, the lawyer had been briefed, and I was determined not to back down. I was done being the silent participant in my own life. I knew what I had to do next, but a part of me still hoped that Jackson would come around, that he would realize what he had done and make things right. I couldn't help but hold on to that sliver of hope, no matter how small. But I wasn't going to wait forever. One evening, I received a call from Jackson. His voice was strained, tired, and he sounded as though he was trying to keep his emotions in check. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything and I want to talk," he said. My heart raced, but I kept my voice calm. "I'm listening." There was a long pause before he spoke again, this time softer. I didn't realize how much you've been going through. I know Chloe and I have been distant. I didn't mean for things to get like this. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Jackson, it's not just about the distance. It's about respect. It's about me, the woman who raised you. The one who has always been there for you. You and Chloe have treated me like I don't matter. He sighed heavily, and for a moment I thought he might cry. I'm sorry, Mom. I've been so caught up in everything with Chloe, I didn't see what was happening. I don't know how to fix this. You start by understanding that I'm not just some problem to be solved, I said, my voice firm. I'm your mother, and I deserve better than to be pushed aside. There was silence on the other end. I could hear his breath, slow and deep. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right, he said finally. But I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. I had been given a glimpse of his remorse, but I also knew that actions spoke louder than words. I wasn't going to let him and Chloe walk all over me anymore. It was time to take control, and I was ready. The next day I called Mr. Hawthorne again. The final steps were upon me, and there was no turning back now. I was going to protect what was mine, even if it meant confronting the very family I had spent my life building. The following week, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Mr. Hawthorne confirming our next steps. The weight of it settled on me, but there was no turning back. Chloe and Jackson had no idea what was coming. I had spent years being the quiet, supportive mother and mother-in-law, silently enduring the hurt, never making waves. But now the waves were crashing. The day after receiving the letter, I sat down with all the paperwork, the bank statements, and the documents I had been gathering for weeks. It felt like I was preparing for battle. But in reality, I was preparing for something more important. The restoration of my dignity. That afternoon, I decided to have another conversation with Jackson. I wasn't going to make it easy on him. If he truly wanted to make things right, he needed to prove it. I waited until the evening when he called, asking if we could meet. The tension was palpable as I opened the door to let him in. He looked at me, guilt written all over his face. Mom, I know I messed up, he began, his voice soft, but I could see the defensiveness in his posture. He was still caught between wanting to do the right thing and feeling the weight of Chloe's influence. I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, he continued, shifting his weight nervously. I know I've been distant. I didn't want it to come to this. I didn't say anything at first, just motioned for him to sit down. You can't fix this by just saying you're sorry, Jackson, I said, my voice steady. It's about respect, and I haven't had that from you or Chloe. You've both made decisions without considering how they would affect me. This house, the money, everything. It's all part of my life, and I won't let you take it from me. He looked at me, eyes wide, as though the reality of what I was saying had just hit him. What do you mean? He asked cautiously. I mean that this is my home, my life, I replied. And I won't let either of you push me out, not without a fight. You've been blind to what's been happening right under your nose. Chloe has been manipulating you, and you've allowed it to happen. Jackson's face fell. I didn't know. He started, but I stopped him. That's the problem, Jackson. You didn't know because you weren't paying attention. And now, I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm demanding that you respect me as your mother. And as someone who has given everything for this family. The room was silent for a long time. Jackson didn't know what to say. But I could see that something had shifted. I wasn't going to settle for being pushed aside any longer. I wasn't just his mother. I was a woman who deserved respect, and I wasn't going to let that slip away. Jackson's expression was unreadable as he sat there, trying to process everything I had just said. His usual confident demeanor seemed to have melted away, leaving behind a man who looked lost. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He had been caught in a web of lies, manipulated by Chloe, and had no idea how deep it went. But my sympathy for him was fleeting. I couldn't let him off the hook that easily. I had given him so many chances, and yet, he had turned his back on me. I wasn't about to make the same mistake again. Jackson, I'm not asking for you to solve this overnight, I said, breaking the silence. But I need you to understand that things can't just go back to how they were. You need to take responsibility for your actions, and Chloe needs to learn that she can't walk all over me. He nodded slowly still. looking unsure of what to say. I get it, Mom, he muttered. But I don't know how to fix this. Chloe, she's different now. She's not the person she used to be. I sighed, feeling the weight of his words. I had seen the change in Chloe too, but I had always chalked it up to her being overwhelmed by the pressures of life. Now I realized how wrong I had been. Jackson, this isn't just about Chloe, I said, my voice firm. This is about you too. You let her manipulate you and you didn't even see it. You've been blind to what's been happening right under your nose. He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom, he said quietly. I didn't want to cause any more problems. Chloe's been so unhappy, and I just wanted to make her happy. I shook my head. Making her happy at the cost of your own mother isn't the way to go about it. You've got to find a balance, Jackson. And you need to start by respecting me. I am not just some burden you can push aside. I am your mother and I deserve better. Jackson looked down. His shoulders slumped in defeat. He didn't know what to say to that. And frankly, I wasn't expecting him to have all the answers. But I had made my point. It was time for him to stop being a passive participant in his own life. Time for him to start standing up for what was right, even if it meant facing the uncomfortable truth about the woman he had married. I'll try, he finally said, the words coming out in a whisper. But I can't promise it'll be easy. I never asked for easy, Jackson, I replied, my voice steady. I asked for respect. That's all. With that, I stood up and walked towards the door. The conversation was far from over, but I had made it clear that I wasn't going to tolerate any more disrespect. Jackson had a long road ahead of him if he was going to make things right. But for now I was done talking. It was time for him to show me he meant what he said. The next day I sat in my living room, waiting for Jackson to return. I had already made my decision. There was no more room for uncertainty or hesitation. If he was truly going to fix things, he needed to take action, not just speak empty words. I had no intention of sitting around waiting for him to get his act together. I had already waited too long. The door creaked open and Jackson walked in. His eyes were tired, but there was a hint of resolve that wasn't there before. He walked up to me, his steps slow like he wasn't sure what to expect. Mom, he began, his voice low. I've been thinking. I know I can't undo the past, but I can try to make things right. Chloe and I held up my hand, stopping him. Jackson, I said, my voice calm but firm. You don't get to just make promises. You've let me down for too long. He took a deep breath like he was steeling himself. I know, Mom. And I've been thinking about everything. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. How much I've been blind to. I've been so focused on making Chloe happy that I forgot who I should be taking care of. I looked at him carefully. It was good that he was acknowledging the truth, but words weren't enough anymore. I need to know that you can actually change, Jackson. That this isn't just a temporary thing. Chloe. She's not the woman I thought she was. And you've let her control you. I can't live like this anymore. He nodded, the weight of my words hitting him hard. I know, he said quietly. I didn't want to see it, but I do now. I stood up. We'll see, I said. I wasn't going to let him off the hook just yet, but I was willing to give him the chance to show me he could be the son I had raised. The son who had respected me and loved me. It wouldn't be easy, and I knew that, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension, but this time, it wasn't the kind that weighed on my shoulders like a burden. It was different. Jackson kept his promise. He spoke to Chloe, and for the first time in months I saw a shift. The coldness between us began to melt, slowly at first, like the first signs of spring after a long, harsh winter. It wasn't perfect, not by any means, but it was progress. We started having dinners together again. Though there was still a distance in the air, like everyone was waiting for something to break. But it didn't break. It held steady, and over time I found myself laughing again. A sound I hadn't heard from myself in what felt like forever. Jackson apologized in his own way. His actions more than his words. He began showing up more often, helping around the house, and listening when I spoke. Chloe too began to soften. She didn't apologize, but she started treating me with more respect, less of the dismissive attitude I had grown so used to. One afternoon, Chloe sat across from me in the living room. I know I've been hard on you, she said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I was angry. I thought I was losing Jackson and I didn't know how to handle it. I was wrong. I nodded, accepting her words without the need for an elaborate response. It's okay, I said, my voice steady. I know it wasn't easy, but we're family. And we have to remember that, no matter what happens. Things weren't perfect, but they were getting there. I could see it in the way Jackson and Chloe interacted, how they made an effort, how we all made an effort to be better, to heal. One evening as I sat at the dinner table, watching Jackson and Chloe laugh together, I realized something. They hadn't just changed for me, they had changed for themselves, and that made all the difference. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't just the mother who took care of everyone else. I was a woman, strong and capable, who had fought for her family and found her way back. I smiled to myself, a quiet smile but one full of peace. In the end, we hadn't just fixed the cracks in our family. We had built something stronger, something more resilient. And that was enough. I had done it. We had done it.